Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take your carefully chosen sources and unearth those crucial nuggets of knowledge, giving you a real shortcut to being truly well-informed.
That's the goal.
Today, we're diving deep into one of the most recognizable and, frankly, complex figures in modern American history, William Jefferson Clinton.
Absolutely, a fascinating subject.
I've got a comprehensive source here, a truly detailed look at his life from his humble beginnings right through to the highest office, encompassing all the triumphs, the controversies, and that remarkable post-presidency.
What's truly fascinating about Clinton is the sheer breadth of his impact, both domestically and internationally, and how consistently he remained a central, often pivotal figure in public life for decades, really.
Yeah.
It really makes you wonder, how did those early experiences, the ones that shaped young Bill Blythe, prepare him for navigating such diverse challenges and constant criticism throughout his career?
Right.
Our mission today is to unpack that long and eventful journey, going beyond just the facts to explore the key moments and decisions that truly defined him.
Exactly. By the end of this deep dive, you'll have a much more nuanced understanding of Clinton's journey, from his days as boy governor all the way to becoming the explainer-in-chief.
Quite a trajectory.
We're going to pull out some surprising insights along the way, looking at his policy achievements, his leadership during global crises, and yes, the personal conduct that sparked unprecedented scrutiny. So let's roll up our sleeves and really unpack this extraordinary life.
Let's do it.
Let's start right at the very beginning in Hope, Arkansas. What was his early life actually like, and what kind of environment shaped young Bill Blythe, who, of course, would later become Bill Clinton?
Well, he was born William Jefferson Blythe III in 1946, and tragically, his father died in a car accident just 3 months before his birth. A really tough start.
Wow. Immediately facing adversity.
Right. His mother, Virginia Dell Cassidy, then went to New Orleans to study nursing, leaving young Bill to be primarily raised by his maternal grandparents, Eldridge and Edith Cassidy, in Hope.
Okay, so his grandparents played a huge role early on.
A massive role. And this upbringing, I think, gives us a very early lens into his evolving worldview.
You mentioned his grandparents, and I remember reading a detail about their grocery store that really struck me as crucial for understanding his character. What was that all about?
Ah, yes, a truly pivotal detail. His grandparents owned a small grocery store. Now, imagine this in the racially segregated South of that era.
Right, tensions were high.
Extremely. But they made a point of selling goods on credit to everyone, regardless of race.
That's significant.
It really is. This early exposure to both the harsh, undeniable realities of segregation and the simple, deeply human act of community support and inclusion must have left an indelible mark on him. It's an interesting contrast, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It offers a glimpse into how his empathy might have developed. But his home life wasn't always so nurturing, was it? I mean, after his mother returned.
No, far from it. His mother later married Roger Clinton Sr., a man Bill described as a gambler and an alcoholic who regularly abused his family, physically abused his mother, and verbally abused Bill and his half-brother Roger Jr.
That's incredibly difficult for a child.
It is. Bill even recounted that the physical abuse only stopped after he, at age 14, confronted his stepfather, a really powerful image of a young man stepping up.
Definitely.
He formally adopted the surname Clinton at age 15, partly as a gesture towards Roger Sr., whom he would actually forgive near his stepfather's death from cancer. So you have this challenging family dynamic, dealing with an abusive stepfather, but also having the stability and, frankly, the moral example of his grandparents. It likely instilled in him a deep drive and a particular kind of empathy, one that many would later recognize in his I feel your pain moments.
So we see this blend of adversity and nurturing support. How did that prepare him for the often brutal and multifaceted political arena he would later enter?
That's a great question because it really seems like a foundational period. This early exposure to both conflict and complex social structures, where he saw both the worst and best of human nature, must have fostered a remarkable resilience.
You have to be resilient.
Absolutely. It taught him from a young age how to navigate difficult situations and understand diverse perspectives, skills that are absolutely essential for any successful politician. It's a very practical, almost raw education in human nature, you know?
Yeah, I see that. Beyond his family life, I understand education and a love for music were central to his formative years. What did that look like?
He attended segregated Hot Springs High School, where he excelled not just as an active student leader class president involved in various clubs, but also as an avid reader and, yes, a talented musician.
That's saxophone.
The tenor saxophone, yeah.
Wow.
He played in a jazz trio called the Three Kings, even winning first chair in the state band's saxophone section. He actually considered a career in music for a while. Yeah, but ultimately felt his skills wouldn't match the very best, the true greats, so he pivoted towards politics. It's a classic trajectory of a driven individual assessing their strengths.
And what sparked that early interest in law, specifically? Was there a particular moment?
There was, apparently, a mock trial defense of the ancient Roman senator Catiline in his Latin class. He realized then, he said, that he would someday study law.
Huh. Interesting how those small moments stick.
Isn't it? How early, seemingly small academic experiences can ignite a lifelong passion and career path.
Fascinating. So we have this determined young man shaped by complex family dynamics and an early taste of both leadership and the law. Here's where it really gets interesting. Two moments in 1963 seem to have profoundly influenced his public aspirations, almost setting a clear trajectory for his future. What were those pivotal experiences?
Those were indeed landmark moments, huge. One was his visit as a Boys Nation senator to the White House, where he had the opportunity to meet President John F. Kennedy.
The famous handshake photo.
Exactly. That handshake became an iconic image symbolizing his early ambitions. The other pivotal moment was watching Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech on TV.
Powerful.
Immensely powerful. It impressed him so much he later memorized it. Imagine the profound impact of witnessing those two figures, one the epitome of political power, the other a moral beacon. At such a formative age, 16 years old, it truly solidified his sense of purpose, pointed him towards public service.
Shifting to his academic journey after high school, you might be surprised by his initial college choice and his focused ambition. Where did he go, and what made it so distinctive?
He chose Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., where he received a Bachelor of Science in Foreign Service in 1968. Now, what's truly notable, and speaks volumes about his early certainty and drive, is that Georgetown was the only university he applied to.
Seriously, just one?
Just one. He wasn't hedging his bets. He had a very clear destination in mind. He wanted to be in D.C., close to the action.
And he didn't just attend, he made his mark there too, right?
Absolutely. He quickly distinguished himself, winning class president elections in both 1964 and 1965. More importantly, from 1964 to 1967, he gained invaluable early political experience, interning and clerking for Arkansas Senator J. William Fulbright.
Ah, Fulbright. A big name.
A very big name, chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Academically, Clinton was exceptional too, elected to Phi Beta Kappa and becoming a brother of the service fraternity Alpha Phi Omega.
So his deep roots in Arkansas politics were established remarkably early, even while he was still in college. What was the significance of that Fulbright connection?
That's a crucial point. His work with Fulbright, a prominent figure in Arkansas and national politics, especially on foreign policy, provided him with invaluable insights into the workings of Washington and the legislative process long before he arrived there as president.
Real hands-on experience.
Exactly. It wasn't just about getting a degree. It was about actively immersing himself in the political world he aspired to join. This kind of practical experience gave him a significant advantage in understanding the machinery of government and, I'd argue, informed his later strategic thinking.
And then, after Georgetown, it was on to Oxford. A Rhodes Scholarship, no less.
That's right.
But this period wasn't without its challenges, particularly one that would follow him for decades. What happened there?
He won that prestigious Rhodes Scholarship to University College, Oxford in 1968, initially studying philosophy, politics, and economics. However, he didn't receive a degree from Oxford. He left early to attend Yale Law School.
Why did he leave early?
Well, partly it was due to concerns about the Vietnam War draft. That was a huge issue looming over young men at the time. While at Oxford, he actively participated in Vietnam War protests, even organizing a moratorium to end the war in Vietnam event in October 1969.
Okay, that brings us to the core of the controversy, his opposition to the Vietnam War and the draft. What exactly unfolded, and why did it become such a flashpoint later on?
Right, this became a major issue in '92. He received educational draft deferments while in England in 1968 and 1969. Upon realizing he might lose his deferment, he looked into options. He unsuccessfully tried to obtain positions in the National Guard and Air Force Officer Candidate School.
Trying to find a way to serve without going to Vietnam.
Essentially, yes. He then made arrangements to join the Reserve Officers Training Corps, or ROTC, program at the University of Arkansas Law School. However, he later decided against joining ROTC.
Why the change of heart?
He articulated it in a really interesting letter to the officer in charge, Colonel Eugene Holmes. He said he opposed the war but felt it was dishonorable to use ROTC or other reserve service just to avoid Vietnam. He committed to subjecting himself to the draft to maintain my political viability within the system, if called upon.
Political viability. That's telling.
Very telling, even then. Ultimately, he received a high draft number, 311, in the December 1969 draft lottery. The highest number drafted that year was 195, so it was highly unlikely he would be called up, and he wasn't.
So he essentially navigated a very tricky situation, expressing opposition to the war while also trying to remain politically viable. How did this resurface during his 1992 presidential campaign?
Oh, it resurfaced intensely. Colonel Holmes issued a notarized statement accusing Clinton of manipulating the situation, basically saying he'd promised to join ROTC and then backed out once he gave the high draft number.
That sounds damaging.
It could have been. There was also a revelation that his uncle had unsuccessfully tried to secure him a position in the Navy Reserve. But the Clinton campaign, particularly manager James Carville, made a strategic decision.
What was that?
They released Clinton's 1969 letter to Colonel Holmes. Carville believed, probably correctly, that voters, especially baby boomers who had lived through Vietnam and often opposed the war themselves, would understand his complex feelings and appreciate his honesty, even if it showed political calculation. It seemed to work. It diffused the issue for many.
This period truly foreshadows a recurring theme in his public life. Navigating intense scrutiny over personal decisions and the, strategic communication required to manage public perception. What does it tell us about his early political instincts?
It's crucial. That letter itself is a testament to his early political calculation, balancing personal conviction with that stated need for political viability. This wasn't just about avoiding the draft. It was about positioning himself for a political future in a deeply divided country.
A balancing act.
A constant balancing act. This tension between personal beliefs, personal history, and political necessity would, of course, follow him throughout his career, teaching him to be incredibly adept, some would say too adept, at managing public perception in the face of controversy.
After Oxford, he continued his academic pursuits at Yale Law School. This is where another significant personal chapter began, isn't it?
Indeed. He earned his Juris Doctor degree in 1973, and it was at Yale, specifically in the Yale Law Library in 1971, that he met his future wife, Hillary Rodham. She was a class year ahead of him.
A famous meeting.
Very famous. They quickly became inseparable, began dating, lived together in New Haven. Their partnership would become one of the most significant and debated in modern American politics.
And even before graduating, he was already getting involved in national politics. Didn't they work on a campaign together?
Absolutely. In 1972, they moved to Texas together for the summer and fall. Bill took on a significant role leading George McGovern's presidential campaign efforts there.
McGovern 72. That was a tough campaign.
A very tough campaign, ultimately unsuccessful.
Yeah.
But during this time, he worked alongside future notable figures like Ron Kirk, who became mayor of Dallas, Ann Richards, future governor of Texas,
Wow.
and even, believe it or not, Steven Spielberg, who was then an unknown television director volunteering for the campaign.
Who kidding? Spielberg.
It was an early glimpse into the powerful connections he would forge and his ability to work with and inspire a diverse group of talented individuals, even in a losing effort.
Returning to Arkansas after law school, Clinton quickly launched his political career. You might wonder if he hit the ground running immediately, or if there were some initial bumps in the road.
He certainly hit the ground running in terms of trying, but yeah, there was a significant learning curve. He started as a law professor at the University of Arkansas, but politics was clearly his driving passion.
So the professorship was temporary.
Seems like it. In 1974, he made his first run for public office, the U.S. House of Representatives in the conservative 3rd District. He challenged the incumbent Republican, John Paul Hammerschmidt.
Tough district for a Democrat.
Very tough. Now, this was right after Watergate, so there was an anti-Republican mood nationally, which definitely helped his campaign. He ran a very energetic race.
And how did he do?
He narrowly lost
Right.
by a 52% to 48% margin. It was a close race, closer than many expected, and a significant early challenge in a district not predisposed to Democrats. A loss, but a strong showing.
So an early defeat, but he didn't stay out of elected office for long, did he?
Not at all. He pivoted quickly, learned from it. In 1976, just 2 years later, he successfully ran for Arkansas Attorney General.
A statewide office.
Right. He won the Democratic primary and significantly faced no opposition in the general election. That was his first statewide electoral victory. It shows he learned quickly from his initial loss and strategically picked his next battle.
This trajectory, with an early defeat followed by rapid success, shows a very pragmatic approach. How did this experience shape his later political philosophy, particularly his third way approach we hear so much about?
I think this early encounter with both success and failure in a historically conservative state was incredibly formative. That 1974 defeat, I'd argue, deeply informed his later third way philosophy.
How so?
It drove home the idea that Democrats needed to adapt to appeal to a broader, more moderate electorate, especially in places like Arkansas and later across the country, particularly after the Republican resurgence under Reagan. It taught him the importance of flexibility, triangulation, strategic positioning.
Finding that middle ground.
Exactly, pushing him towards policy ideas that could bridge ideological divides rather than just appealing to a traditional liberal base. It was a proving ground for compromise and, well, political survival.
By 1978, at just 32 years old, he became governor of Arkansas, earning him the notable nickname Boy Governor. What were his priorities and early challenges in that first term?
He was indeed the youngest governor in the country at the time, and the second youngest in Arkansas's history. His first term initially focused on things like educational reform and road maintenance, bread and butter issues critical for Arkansas.
And Hillary was involved too.
Yes, Hillary led a successful committee focused on urban healthcare reform, so they were working as a team from the start. However, this early term faced immediate headwinds.
Like what?
Well, some unpopular policies like a new motor vehicle tax that angered a lot of people, and then there was widespread public anger over the escape of Cuban refugees from the Mariel boat lift who were being detained at Fort Chaffee in Arkansas in 1980. That caused huge problems for him.
Those sound like serious challenges for a young governor. Did they impact his reelection?
They absolutely did, massively. These issues, combined with a general conservative tide nationally that year, contributed to his defeat in the 1980 re-election bid to Republican Frank D. White.
So he lost after one term.
He did. He famously joked afterwards that he became the youngest ex-governor in the nation's history. It was a humbling, shocking defeat, but I think ultimately very instructive for him. He learned you couldn't take anything for granted.
But this wasn't the end of his time in the governor's mansion. It was merely a temporary setback, a brief interlude before his significant comeback.
Precisely, a crucial comeback. He was reelected governor in 1982, defeating Frank White in a rematch, and went on to serve for 10 more years, 5 consecutive terms.
10 more years. That's a long time.
It is. And during this period, Arkansas also changed its gubernatorial term from 2 to 4 years in 1986, which gave him longer stretches to implement his vision without constantly campaigning.
And what was that vision? What did he focus on during that long second stretch?
He's widely credited with working hard to transform Arkansas's economy and, very significantly, improving the educational system. He really focused on addressing the issues that had contributed to his earlier defeat.
I recall Hillary played a critical role in those education reforms. What did that involve?
Yes, absolutely. Hillary chaired the Arkansas Education Standards Committee, which pushed for crucial and controversial reforms. These included advocating for more spending for schools, supported by a sales tax increase that he had to fight for.
Always tough, raising taxes.
Always. The reforms also included better opportunities for gifted children, vocational education, higher teacher salaries, more course variety, and very controversially compulsory teacher competency exams.
Teacher testing, yeah, that would stir things up.
It did. But these reforms passed in a special legislative session in 1983, the longest in Arkansas history after Clinton really put his political capital on the line. Many consider this his greatest achievement as governor. He also implemented things like senior citizen benefits, removing sales tax from medications, and increasing home poverty tax exemptions. Tangible benefits for people.
His ability to come back from that early defeat and serve for a decade demonstrates not just resilience, but also remarkable adaptability. How did this period truly prepare him for the national stage, especially in terms of his new Democrat identity?
His focus on education and economic transformation in Arkansas was, in many ways, a proving ground for the larger national policy debates he would engage in during his presidency. It's where he honed that message.
And the New Democrat angle.
What's truly fascinating here is his early leadership among New Democrats and within the Democratic Leadership Council, a DLC. He chaired the DLC from 1990 to 1991. He advocated for things like welfare reform and smaller government, a strategic move to the center after Reagan's success, challenging traditional democratic orthodoxy.
Trying to make the party electable again nationally.
That was the goal. This was a critical ideological shift for the Democratic Party, laying the groundwork for his future national appeal by signaling a departure from purely liberal positions. It shows a politician keenly aware of the need to broaden the party's base and respond to the political climate.
During this extended period as governor, some significant controversies emerged, which unfortunately would echo and amplify throughout his presidential administration, becoming recurring themes of public scrutiny. What were the first of these?
Well, the first and perhaps most enduring, one that really dogged him for years, was the Whitewater controversy.
Right. That involved real estate.
Exactly. It involved his and Hillary's personal and business affairs, specifically transactions related to their investment in the Whitewater Development Corporation, a failed real estate venture from the late 70s.
And what came of it?
After extensive investigation over several years, both during his governorship and presidency, by independent counsels, it's important to note that no indictments were ever made against the Clintons themselves related to their Arkansas years or their role in Whitewater. However, the shadow of the investigation itself, the constant questions, definitely remain and fueled suspicions.
You mentioned his stance on the death penalty shifted. Can you elaborate on that and its significance, particularly politically?
Yeah, it was a notable shift. Initially, he was considered an opponent of the death penalty, or at least ambivalent. However, he later switched positions, reflecting a broader shift in the Democratic Party towards tougher crime stances. He stated that Democrats should no longer feel guilty about protecting the innocent.
A clear move towards the center on crime.
Absolutely. As governor, he oversaw the first 4 executions in Arkansas since the death penalty was reinstated there in 1976. And in a highly scrutinized move during his 1992 presidential campaign, he even returned to Arkansas mid-campaign to affirm that the controversial execution of Ricky Ray Rector would proceed. Rector was brain damaged from a suicide attempt after killing a police officer.
That was controversial.
Very. The decision was widely seen as a political move to counter any potential soft-on-crime accusations that Republicans inevitably leveled against Democrats. It demonstrated his willingness to make very tough, some would say ruthless, choices for political viability.
And there were allegations involving Mena Airport. That sounds like something out of a movie.
It does, right. The Mena Airport drug smuggling allegations. Basically, the small Mena Intermountain Municipal Airport in Arkansas was linked to a large-scale cocaine smuggling operation run by a pilot named Barry Seal, who is also reportedly a CIA informant involved somehow in the Iran-Contra affair.
And the connection to Clinton.
Clinton, as governor, was accused by some critics and conspiracy theorists of knowing about this operation, or even protecting it. However, no credible evidence ever emerged to prove he was involved or knew about it. It remained mostly in the realm of rumor and allegation.
Other personal allegations also surfaced during this time.
Yes, quite a few. He was accused by Jennifer Flowers during the '92 campaign of having had an affair with her while he was governor, which he initially denied parts of, then later acknowledged an encounter. She also accused him of cocaine use as governor, which he denied. Separately, his half-brother, Roger Clinton, struggled with an addiction and was imprisoned for cocaine offenses in 1985. Bill later pardoned him.
And the Troopergate affair was another sensational one, often linked to the later Paula Jones lawsuit. What was that all about?
Right. Troopergate broke in late 1993. This involved allegations made by a couple of Arkansas state troopers, Larry Patterson and Roger Perry, who claimed they had arranged sexual liaisons for Clinton when he was governor.
Arranged them.
That was their claim. They even mentioned facilitating encounters with a woman named Paula, which was a clear reference to Paula Jones, whose lawsuit would come later.
How did this come out?
These allegations were reported by journalist David Brock in the conservative magazine The American Spectator. However, Brock later famously recanted his story. He apologized to Clinton, calling it politically motivated bad journalism, and stating that the troopers were greedy and had slimy motives. But the damage, in terms of public perception, was done.
And one more strange case from that era.
Yes, the 1987 Don Henry and Kevin Ives killings. 2 teenage boys found dead on railroad tracks. Their deaths were initially ruled accidental, but later ruled homicides. Various conspiracy theories emerged, some trying to link the deaths to drug smuggling out of Medema and accusing Clinton and state authorities of a cover-up. Again, no credible evidence ever supported these theories.
This period truly served as a powerful preview of the intense scrutiny his personal and financial life would face once he reached the national stage. What does it reveal about the nature of political warfare at that level?
It vividly demonstrates how even regional controversies, rumors, allegations, and personal decisions could be amplified and weaponized on the national stage. They escalated into issues that define public perception long before his White House bid even began.
Setting a pattern.
Exactly. It set a pattern of him constantly defending himself against a barrage of attacks, both personal and political. It prepared him, perhaps inadvertently, for the relentless political battles of the presidency. It also highlights the growing importance of rapid response, opposition research, and media management in modern politics. It was a different game.
In 1988, he had a brief national moment, though perhaps not the one he intended or that resonated as he might have hoped. What happened at the Democratic National Convention?
Ah, yes, the '88 convention speech. He was tasked with giving the nationally televised nominating speech for Michael Dukakis on the opening night. A big opportunity.
But it didn't go well.
It really didn't. His speech ran for a very lengthy 33 minutes, apparently twice the expected duration, and it just didn't connect. It was widely criticized for being too long, too detailed, and frankly, boring. The crowd actually started cheering when he finally said, "In conclusion."
Ouch.
Yeah. It was an early, somewhat awkward taste of the national spotlight, certainly not the breakout moment he might have envisioned. He actually went on Johnny Carson's show shortly after to joke about it, which helped repair the damage a bit, showed he could laugh at himself.
After years in Arkansas, 1992 was his big leap to the national stage. You might remember the incredible challenges he faced right out of the gate and how he earned a famous nickname that would stick with him. What was the start of that campaign like?
The campaign started incredibly slow. He wasn't well known nationally. He finished a distant third in the Iowa caucus, which isn't the kind of momentum a challenger wants. Basically an asterisk.
Not a great start.
Not at all. Then, and during the crucial New Hampshire primary, things got really bad. Reports of an extramarital affair with Jennifer Flowers emerged in the tabloids. This caused him to fall significantly behind former Massachusetts Senator Paul Tsongas in the polls. It looked like his campaign might just collapse right there.
A potential campaign-ending scandal. How did he respond?
In a very high-stakes, calculated, and risky move, he and Hillary appeared on 60 Minutes right after the Super Bowl. It was a huge audience. They directly rebutted some of the charges and addressed the issue of their marriage head-on.
I remember that, Hillary's Stand By My Man comment.
Exactly. It was a raw, defining moment, and it seemed to work, at least partially. It helped him regain some delegates and public trust, showing resilience. He ultimately finished second to Tsongas in New Hampshire, but
What?
given how badly he had been trailing just days before and the relatively narrow margin of his loss, the media spun it as a huge triumph. They labeled him the comeback kid. That nickname perfectly captured his unexpected resilience and ability to survive a crisis.
So, the comeback kid indeed. How did he build on that momentum to secure the nomination? It wasn't smooth sailing after that either, was it?
No, it wasn't entirely smooth, but he did build momentum. Securing the Democratic nomination involved key victories in Southern primaries on Super Tuesday, Florida, Texas, others. That gave him a sizable delegate lead, playing to his regional strength.
Solidifying his base.
Right. But then he needed to prove he wasn't just a regional candidate. He did that by scoring resounding victories in big northern and western states like New York and, crucially, California, defeating former Governor Jerry Brown there. Those wins transformed him into the consensus candidate for the Democratic Party.
Even amidst this surge, some familiar issues seem to follow him, right? The sort of character question.
Yes, exactly. Questions of conflict of interest arose concerning state business in Arkansas and the politically powerful Rose law firm, where Hillary Rodham Clinton was a partner. He contended these questions were moot, as all transactions with the state had been properly handled and deducted before determining Hillary's firm pay, but the questions lingered.
And the two for the price of one comment.
Ah, yes. He famously said that, with Hillary, voters would be getting 2 presidents for the price of one. This highlighted her intelligence and capability, but it also became a point of criticism for some, questioning her role and influence. It cut both ways.
One of the more controversial moves came when he was still governor of Arkansas while campaigning for president. It involved the death penalty, didn't it? We touched on this earlier.
We did. He made that decision to return home mid-campaign to ensure that the execution of Ricky Ray Rector would proceed. Rector, as we mentioned, was severely mentally impaired. Despite this, the courts upheld the sentence, and Clinton's decision not to intervene to let the execution proceed was widely seen as a calculated political move.
To look tough on crime.
Exactly. To inoculate himself against those soft-on-crime accusations heading into the general election against George H.W. Bush. It was a stark example of his political pragmatism.
And then we have the famous, "I feel your pain" quote. What was the context behind that? It became iconic?
It really did. This came during a campaign event, I believe a fundraiser, where he was confronted by an AIDS activist, Robert Rafsky, who was criticizing his record and demanding more action. Instead of getting defensive, Clinton listened intently and responded with empathy, saying that famous line.
Connecting emotionally.
Precisely. It helped elevate AIDS as a significant issue in the 1992 presidential election, something it hadn't been to that extent before. He later met with ACTUP and other leading AIDS advocates to discuss his agenda, agreeing to make a major AIDS policy speech and sign on to ACTUP's 5-point plan. It showed his responsiveness and, well, that ability to connect.
In the general election, he faced incumbent Republican George H.W. Bush and the wild card, independent Ross Perot. What were the key factors in his victory?
Several key factors. He defeated incumbent George H.W. Bush, who was definitely weakened. Bush had broken his famous "read my lips, no new taxes" promise, which hurt him badly with conservatives. Plus, the economy was sluggish, not in deep recession, but definitely souring, and Bush seemed out of touch.
It's the economy, stupid.
That was the famous Carville mantra inside the Clinton campaign. And then you had Ross Perot, the Texas billionaire, running as an independent. He focused heavily on the deficit and got a surprising amount of support, nearly 19% of the popular vote.
Did Perot take votes from Bush?
That's the conventional wisdom, yes. Perot's anti-establishment deficit hawk message likely appealed more to potential Bush voters than Clinton voters, though he drew from both sides. Clinton won with 43% of the popular vote, but a decisive electoral college victory.
And what was the significance of that win?
It ended 12 years of Republican control of the White House. It also gave Democrats full control of Congress, a feat not achieved since Jimmy Carter's presidency, offering the potential for unified government. And significantly, he made history as the first president born in the baby boomer generation, signaling a real generational shift in American leadership.
The comeback kid narrative wasn't just about winning primaries. It really defined his political resilience in the face of intense personal and political attacks. How did this experience set a precedent for how he would approach future challenges and scandals?
This early experience in navigating scandals, the Flowers allegations, the draft controversy, especially with the strategic support of Hillary and his campaign team like Carville and George Stephanopoulos, set a crucial precedent. It demonstrated to him and to the political world that he could withstand intense personal scrutiny if he remained focused, fought back hard, and leveraged the right channels to communicate directly with voters.
Learning to fight fire with fire.
In many ways, yes. Setting up that war room mentality. This raises an important question. What are the long-term implications when a presidential candidate demonstrates this ability to withstand and even thrive amidst personal attacks? Does it change the role of character versus competence in presidential elections? It certainly suggested a shifting public tolerance, perhaps, where perceived performance or connection could sometimes overshadow personal perceived failings.
4 years later, in 1996, he sought re-election, but it wasn't a sure thing initially. Not at all. What made his chances seem slim at the outset?
Yeah, things looked really bleak for him around 94, 95. His chances initially seemed slim due to growing public distress stemming from the Whitewater controversy, which was still simmering and being investigated. And then the huge factor was the lopsided defeat of National Democrats in the 1994 midterm elections.
The Republican Revolution.
Exactly. Led by Newt Gingrich and the Contract with America, Republicans took control of both houses of Congress for the first time in 40 years. It was an absolute political earthquake, seen as a massive repudiation of Clinton's first 2 years.
And his approval ratings reflected that.
They did. His approval rating even dropped to a concerning 40% in early 1995. There were prominent Democrats openly suggesting he should consider dropping out of the race entirely, maybe let Al Gore run. It was a very dark period for his administration.
That sounds like a dire situation for an incumbent president. How did he manage to rebound so remarkably?
Several things happened. He rebounded by mid-1995, partly through strategic triangulation, working with the Republican Congress on some issues, like welfare reform, while also drawing contrasts and opposing them on others, like budget cuts that led to government shutdowns.
The shutdowns actually helped him.
He did, surprisingly. The public tended to blame the Republicans more for the shutdowns. He also benefited hugely from a strong economy that was really beginning to pick up steam by 95 and 96. Jobs were being created, the deficit was shrinking.
So peace and prosperity.
That was the narrative. And the growing unpopularity of the congressional Republicans, who, led by Gingrich, were seen by many independent voters as too extreme, too confrontational. By early 1996, polls showed Clinton with a significant lead, sometimes up to 20 points, over his likely Republican opponent, Senate Majority Leader Bob Dole.
So incumbency in the economy worked for him this time.
Absolutely. Unlike George H.W. Bush in 1992, Clinton's incumbency greatly benefited him in this general election. Most Americans felt the country was headed in the right direction. He once again faced Ross Perot, nominated by the Reform Party, but Perot was much less of a factor this time, garnering only about 8% of the vote.
So he capitalized on a favorable economic climate and a less popular opposition. What was the outcome on Election Day in 96?
On Election Day, Clinton secured a strong victory. He won 379 electoral votes to Bob Dole's 159. Popular vote was about 49% to 41%. This made him the first Democrat since Franklin D. Roosevelt to win 2 consecutive presidential elections. A truly significant achievement, especially given his political vulnerabilities just a couple of years prior. What's truly fascinating here is how he leveraged the power of incumbency and that favorable economic climate to overcome earlier political vulnerabilities and secure a decisive re-election. The dramatic shift in public opinion from those low approval ratings and calls for him to withdraw to a strong re-election victory really highlights his political agility.
And the economy.
And the profound impact of economic performance on presidential fortunes. It also underscores his remarkable ability to connect with the American public and articulate a vision, the bridge to the 21st century, that resonated even with a divided government, as Republicans kept control of Congress.
Taking office for his second term on January 20, 1997. January 20, 1993 for the first term. My mistake. Let's rewind to the start of his presidency. He quickly moved to implement his third-way philosophy. Before we delve into the policies, could you quickly explain what that third-way philosophy actually entails for our listeners?
Certainly, and good catch on the year. The third way was essentially an ideological position popular among center-left parties in the 90s that sought to reconcile right-wing and left-wing politics. It advocated for a centrist approach.
So what did that look like practically?
It tried to blend traditional democratic goals like social justice, opportunity, support for the working class with more fiscally conservative means. Things like fiscal responsibility, balanced budgets, welfare reform, free trade, and market-based solutions rather than purely government-run programs.
So not traditional liberalism, not conservatism, but something in between.
Exactly. Think of it as an attempt to find a middle ground, moving beyond the traditional liberal-conservative dichotomy that dominated the late 20th century. For instance, instead of solely government programs, it might look for public-private partnerships. It aimed to be pragmatic, modern, and responsive to a changed electorate that seemed wary of big government after Reagan.
That makes perfect sense. So with that moderate approach in mind, what were his initial weeks in office like back in January 1993? Were there any early missteps? He came in with the Democratic Congress, right?
He did, yes, Democratic House and Senate. But his initial weeks were, to put it mildly, a bit rocky. They were marked by some exhaustion from the campaign and, frankly, an inexperienced White House staff, leading to a few noticeable missteps.
Like what?
Well, for instance, his first 2 choices for Attorney General, Zoe Baird and Kimball Wood, both had to withdraw over issues related to hiring undocumented immigrants as nannies, the so-called Nannygate. Not the smoothest start for an administration trying to project competence and ethics.
Right, I remember that. Not ideal.
Definitely not.
And then there was the don't ask, don't tell policy. That was a really contentious issue right from the beginning, wasn't it?
Extremely contentious. One of the most significant early challenges. He had campaigned on lifting the ban on gays serving openly in the military. But his proposal met immediate and fierce opposition from the military leadership, particularly Colin Powell, who was then chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and from key members of Congress, including powerful Democrats like Senator Sam Nunn.
So he couldn't just order it.
He likely could have tried via executive order, but the political backlash would have been enormous, and Congress might have tried to overturn it legislatively. The result was a messy compromise policy known as don't ask, don't tell.
Explain that again briefly.
It allowed gay individuals to serve as long as they kept their sexual orientation secret. Don't ask, don't tell, don't pursue. The military was forbidden from asking recruits about their orientation, and service members weren't supposed to reveal it.
A compromise nobody really liked.
Pretty much. Gay rights advocates criticized him heavily for not going further, for not fully integrating the military by executive order, like Truman had desegregated the armed forces decades earlier. However, his defenders argued that an executive order might have prompted Congress to pass a law statutorily excluding gays, potentially making future integration even harder. Clinton himself later criticized the policy's implementation, saying it wasn't enforced as intended, and it was eventually repealed in 2011 under Obama.
So a compromise that pleased few, but perhaps prevented a worse outcome, politically speaking. Any other early legislative efforts that stumbled?
Yes. An early legislative priority, a $16 billion economic stimulus package aimed at creating jobs and funding inner-city programs, was defeated by a Republican filibuster in the Senate. That was a big loss early on.
So not everything went smoothly despite Democratic control.
Not at all. Consequently, his approval rating at the 100-day mark was the lowest for any president up to that point, signaling the difficult road ahead, even with his own party nominally in charge.
This early period demonstrates the immediate friction between his agenda, even the third-way parts, and the political realities he faced, including a wary military and a resistant Congress, even with Democratic majorities. What does this tell us about the challenges of presidential leadership?
It really illustrates the immediate friction. Even with unified government on paper, factions within his own party and well-organized opposition could stymie a president's agenda. The don't ask, don't tell compromise, while certainly criticized from all sides, also showcased his pragmatism. He secured some progress, prevented outright exclusion, rather than losing entirely.
The art of the possible.
Exactly. It illustrates his willingness to adapt and find common ground, even if imperfectly, to achieve a measure of his policy goals. That's a hallmark of the third-way approach, aiming for results over ideological purity, sometimes leading to compromises that satisfy no one completely.
Despite those early challenges, there were also significant early successes and major policy moves that shaped his first term. What was one of the first popular pieces of legislation he signed?
He quickly signed the Family and Medical Leave Act of 1993 into law, FMLA. This required large employers to allow employees up to 12 weeks of unpaid leave for family or medical reasons, childbirth, illness, caring for a sick family member.
That had been vetoed before, right?
Yes. President Bush had vetoed it twice. So signing it was a clear early win for Clinton. It enjoyed broad bipartisan support in the end and proved to be very popular with the public. He also, just 2 days after taking office on the 20th anniversary of Roe v. Wade, reversed Reagan and Bush-era restrictions on domestic and international family planning programs.
Sending a signal on abortion rights.
A clear signal, though he also adopted the slogan, first used while campaigning, that abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. Interestingly, abortion rates actually declined by about 18% during his administration for various complex reasons.
On the economic front, he made a pretty bold move, especially after campaigning on middle-class tax cuts. What was that?
He did make a significant shift. In his first address to the nation in February 1993, he announced a plan to raise taxes, primarily on higher earners, corporations, and on energy, to close the budget deficit. This was a notable pivot from his campaign promise of broad middle-class tax cuts.
Why the change?
His economic team, particularly Treasury Secretary Lloyd Bentsen and Budget Director Leon Panetta, convinced him, based on advice from figures like Fed Chairman Alan Greenspan, that reducing the deficit was paramount. The theory was that reduced government borrowing would lower long-term interest rates, which would then stimulate private investment and economic growth more effectively than a short-term tax cut or stimulus. It was a politically risky but economically strategic gamble.
And what about the tragic Waco incident that occurred during his first term? How did that unfold?
Yes. A very somber note in his first term was the Waco incident in April 1993. This involved the Branch Davidians, a religious sect led by David Koresh, who were suspected of stockpiling illegal weapons. After a botched initial raid by the ATF led to deaths on both sides, the FBI initiated a 51-day siege of their compound near Waco, Texas.
And the fiery end.
Right. Attorney General Janet Reno, after consulting with Clinton, authorized the FBI to use armored vehicles to insert tear gas into the compound to try and force the Davidians out. Tragically, during this operation, a fire broke out. The origins are still debated, which engulfed the compound, leading to the deaths of 75 people, including 24 children.
Horrific. What was Clinton's role?
It's important to clarify that the initial investigation and the decision for the initial raid were under the Bush administration. Clinton and Reno inherited the situation. Reno took full responsibility for the decision to use tear gas, though Clinton supported her decision. It was a tragedy that haunted the administration.
In August 1993, he signed a significant piece of budget legislation. Can you tell us about that? This was the follow-through on the deficit reduction plan.
Exactly. The Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act of 1993, often just called the 93 Budget Deal, this was a really significant piece of legislation that narrowly passed Congress without a single Republican vote in either the House or the Senate. Vice President Gore had to cast the tie-breaking vote in the Senate.
Partisan from the start, what did it do?
It enacted a mix of spending cuts and tax increases aimed at long-term deficit reduction. It cut taxes for about 15 million low-income families and 90% of small businesses through an expansion of the earned income tax credit. But it raised income taxes on the wealthiest 1.2% of taxpayers, raised the corporate income tax, and implemented a gas tax increase. It also mandated long-term spending restraints. It was a huge controversial step towards getting the deficit under control.
His healthcare reform attempt was another major undertaking, one that ultimately failed, becoming a major legislative defeat. What was its ambition, and why did it fall apart?
It was incredibly ambitious. The administration proposed a plan for universal health coverage through a system of managed competition among private insurers, with mandates for employers to provide insurance. Hillary Clinton was put in charge of developing the plan, leading a large task force.
Hillary Care, as it was dubbed.
Right. Initially, it was well received, tapping into public concern about rising healthcare costs and lack of coverage. But the plan itself was incredibly complex, over 1,300 pages. And it ultimately failed due to highly organized and well-funded opposition from conservatives, the American Medical Association, the health insurance industry, remember those Harry and Louise ads, and small business groups.
What went wrong internally?
Compounding the external opposition was a lack of coordination and strategic missteps within the White House itself. They kept the process secret for too long, didn't build consensus effectively, and couldn't counter the opposition's narrative. It died in Congress in 1994 without ever coming to a full vote. This marked the first major legislative defeat for his administration, a huge blow to his domestic agenda.
But he did get some other significant legislation through. He signed the Brady Bill, a landmark piece of gun control legislation.
Correct. He signed the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act, or Brady Bill, in November 1993. Named after James Brady, Reagan's press secretary, who was wounded in the 1981 assassination attempt. It mandated federal background checks for firearm purchases from licensed dealers and imposed a 5-day waiting period until the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, or NICS, was fully implemented in 1998.
And the earned income tax credit expansion.
Yes. As part of the 93 budget, he significantly expanded the Earned Income Tax Credit, or EITC. This is a crucial wage subsidy for low-income workers, and the expansion helped lift millions of families out of poverty during the 90s. Many consider it one of his most successful anti-poverty policies.
And a very controversial economic move, also pushed through in 93 but taking effect Jan 1, 94, was the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA.
Incredibly controversial. NAFTA eliminated most tariffs between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. It was actually negotiated primarily under President Bush, but Clinton adopted it and pushed it through Congress. This required building a difficult coalition of pro-trade Republicans and moderate Democrats, overcoming fierce opposition from labor unions, environmental groups, protectionist Democrats like Dick Gephardt, and very vocally Ross Perot and his supporters.
Why was it so controversial?
Opponents feared it would lead to massive job losses in the U.S. as companies moved production to Mexico for cheaper labor, and that it would depress wages and weaken environmental standards. Proponents argued it would boost trade, create economic growth in all three countries, and lower prices for consumers. Getting it passed was a huge legislative lift for Clinton, relying heavily on Republican votes. It was a cornerstone of his economic policy promoting global trade and market liberalization.
His administration also embraced technology in a very forward-thinking way for the time.
Yes. Demonstrating an early embrace of the internet age, his administration launched the first official White House website, whitehouse.gov, on July 29, 1994. This was part of a wider push, spearheaded by Vice President Gore, to make federal agencies, courts, and the military more accessible online through the Information Superhighway Initiative. Quite forward-thinking for the mid-90s.
Finally, in September 1994, just before the midterms, he signed the Omnibus Crime Bill. What did that entail? Another tough-on-crime measure.
Very much so. The Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1994 was a massive piece of legislation. It significantly expanded funding for police officers, the famous 100,000 new cops, and for prisons. It expanded the federal death penalty to dozens of new offenses, including non-death resulting crimes like running a large-scale drug enterprise. And notably, it included a 10-year ban on the manufacture and sale of certain types of semi-automatic firearms defined as assault weapons.
That assault weapons ban was also very controversial.
Extremely. Praised by gun control advocates, fiercely opposed by gun rights groups. The overall bill reflected Clinton's New Democrat positioning tough on crime, investing in law enforcement. But despite these legislative efforts, after 2 years of Democratic control in Congress, the political tide turned dramatically. The Democrats lost control of both the House and Senate to Republicans in the 1994 midterm elections, the first time that had happened in 40 years. This fundamentally shifted the political landscape for the rest of his presidency. So what does all this mean for understanding Clinton's first term? It was undeniably a mix of bold initiatives, the budget, NAFTA trying for healthcare, and significant setbacks, particularly with that ambitious but ultimately failed healthcare reform.
A real roller coaster.
Absolutely. But his ability to get major legislation like NAFTA and the '93 budget passed, often through intense negotiation and building unusual coalitions, relying on Republicans for NAFTA, needing every Democrat for the budget, really defined his pragmatic approach to governance. It shows a president who was willing to take on difficult, ideologically charged issues and pivot when necessary. It indicated a strategic, rather than purely ideological, leadership style, willing to expend political capital for what he saw as necessary reforms.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Amidst all these political battles and legislative struggles, a significant public health turnaround also occurred, one that had a profound impact globally. What was that?
We're talking about the fight against HIV/AIDS. This was a crisis that had been devastating communities for over a decade. In a 1995 White House conference on HIV/AIDS, Clinton spoke with new optimism. He projected a cure and vaccine for the disease might be possible, and he highlighted his administration's accomplishments, such as streamlining and accelerating the FDA's drug approval process for AIDS treatments.
And did that make a difference?
A huge difference. The impact was tangible and truly remarkable. 1996 marked the first year ever that the number of new AIDS diagnoses in the U.S. actually declined. Then, in 1997, there was an even more dramatic 47% decline in AIDS-related deaths.
Wow, nearly halved in 1 year. Why?
This turnaround was largely attributed to the growing effectiveness of new drug therapies, particularly the cocktail approach, known as highly active antiretroviral therapy, or HAART. These drugs didn't cure AIDS, but they could suppress the virus, allowing people to live much longer, healthier lives. The administration's push for faster drug approval and increased research funding, combined with the scientific breakthroughs, really changed the trajectory of the epidemic in developed countries. It was a profound and positive shift in public health, saving countless lives.
His second term, from 1997 to 2001, was marked by a fascinating duality. Both continued policy achievements, often through compromise with that Republican Congress, and unprecedented personal scandal. Let's start with some of those key policy wins during this period.
Absolutely. Despite the divided government, he did achieve some significant things. He proposed and successfully passed the State Children's Health Insurance Program, or SCIP, in 1997.
SAAP, what did that do?
This was a really significant bipartisan effort, developed with the support of Senators Ted Kennedy on the left and Orrin Hatch on the right, and strongly championed by Hillary Clinton. It provided federal funds to states to provide health insurance coverage for children and families with incomes too high to qualify for Medicaid, but who couldn't afford private insurance. It aimed to cover up to 5 million children initially.
A major expansion of children's health coverage.
Huge. It's often cited as one of the most successful government programs launched in that era, a testament to what could still be achieved with cross-party collaboration, even in a polarized time.
Hillary Clinton continued her advocacy work even during the second term, didn't she? Focusing on children and families.
She did, very much so. Besides SDGs, she played a crucial role in shepherding through Congress the Adoption and Safe Families Act in 1997, which focused on child welfare and promoting adoption over long-term foster care. And 2 years later, the Foster Care Independence Act, aimed at providing resources and support for youth transitioning out of foster care into adulthood. These were important legislative achievements in social policy, often overlooked amidst the larger dramas.
And on the fiscal front, did the budget balancing continue?
Yes, President Clinton successfully negotiated the passage of the Balanced Budget Act of 1997 with the Republican-controlled Congress. This act aimed to balance the federal budget by 2002 through a combination of spending cuts and some targeted tax cuts. It further demonstrated his continued ability to work across the aisle on fiscal matters, leading to actual budget surpluses by the end of his term.
And another big piece of financial legislation.
Right. In 1999, he also signed the Financial Services Modernization Act, better known as the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, into law. This controversially repealed key parts of the Glass-Steagall Act from the 1930s.
You mentioned the repeal of parts of the Glass-Steagall Act. For our listeners who might not be financial policy experts, what was Glass-Steagall and why was its repeal controversial?
Great question. It's complex but important. The Glass-Steagall Act was a landmark law passed during the Great Depression back in 1933. Its main purpose was to separate commercial banking, the kind where you have your checking and savings accounts, and banks make loans from investment banking, which involves underwriting and trading stocks and bonds.
So regular banks couldn't gamble with depositors' money on Wall Street.
That was the core idea, yes. To prevent conflicts of interest and reduce the kind of excessive financial risk-taking that many believed had contributed to the stock market crash of '29 and the subsequent banking failures. It created a firewall between those two types of financial activities.
And Gramm-Leach-Bliley tore down that firewall.
Essentially, yes. Its repeal in 1999 allowed commercial banks, investment banks, securities firms, and insurance companies to merge and operate under one roof, creating huge financial conglomerates like Citigroup, which had already formed in anticipation of the repeal.
Why was it repealed? What was the argument for it?
Proponents, including many in the Clinton administration, like Treasury Secretary Robert Rubin and Republicans in Congress, argued that Glass-Steagall was outdated, hindering the competitiveness of U.S. financial institutions against global rivals who didn't face such restrictions. They argued it would increase efficiency and innovation in the financial sector.
And the controversy. Why do people criticize the repeal?
The controversy, which really intensified after the 2008 financial crisis, is whether removing that firewall contributed to the excessive risk-taking, complex financial products like mortgage-backed securities, and conflicts of interest that led to the crisis. Critics argue it fueled the too-big-to-fail problem and made the financial system inherently less stable. Proponents dispute a direct causal link, arguing other factors were more important. But it remains a major point of debate about financial regulation. This period truly shows a president who, despite facing a Republican Congress and, as we'll discuss, increasing personal pressures, could still secure significant legislative victories through strategic compromise and negotiation. The SCIP program, in particular, is a landmark achievement, dramatically expanding health coverage for children across the country.
Real policy legacy?
Absolutely. It really speaks to the pragmatic and results-oriented approach of his third-way politics. It highlights his capacity to identify areas of common ground, even with political opponents like Gingrich and Trent Lott, and push through impactful reforms. Even in a highly partisan environment, he knew how to make deals.
However, as you'll recall, the second term became largely defined, at least in the media and public consciousness, by ongoing investigations and personal conduct that dominated the headlines. The Whitewater investigation, for instance, continued to loom large.
It did. The Whitewater investigation, which had started back in Arkansas, continued throughout much of his presidency, led first by independent counsel Robert B. Fisk, and then, more famously and controversially, by Kenneth Starr. It expanded into other areas beyond the original land deal. Ultimately, after years of investigation and millions spent, Starr's final report found insufficient evidence to prosecute the Clintons themselves regarding Whitewater or related matters like.
Like Felgate, what was that?
Right. The White House FBI files controversy, or Felgate, which broke in 1996. This concerned the improper access to hundreds of FBI background security clearance documents, mostly of former Republican White House officials, by the White House Office of Personnel Security, allegedly under Craig Livingstone, a political appointee.
Improper access sounds bad. What was the explanation?
The White House claimed it was a bureaucratic mistake, using outdated lists. Critics suspected political espionage, trying to dig up dirt. Independent counsel Robert Ray, who took over from Starr, ultimately found no credible evidence of any crime or involvement by senior White House officials, including the First Lady, though he criticized the lax procedures.
Another lingering issue from the first term that carried over was the Travelgate controversy. What was that about, and what was Hillary's alleged involvement?
Travelgate erupted early, back in 1993. It involved Clinton abruptly firing 7 longtime employees of the White House Travel Office. The administration claimed it was in response to findings of financial mismanagement and improprieties in the office's operations.
But critics had another explanation.
Critics, particularly Republicans in Congress, alleged that the firings were orchestrated to allow friends of the Clintons, specifically Harry Thomason, a Hollywood producer and friend from Arkansas, to take over the lucrative White House travel business. It looked like cronyism.
And Hillary's role.
Investigations, including one by special counsel Robert Fisk, found that Hillary Clinton had played a role in advocating for the firings and had given factually false testimony about her involvement to investigators on Congress. Fisk concluded her statements were inaccurate, but again, there was insufficient evidence to prosecute her for perjury or obstruction. These ongoing investigations, while not resulting in indictments against the Clintons directly, certainly contributed to a pervasive atmosphere of scrutiny, scandal, and public skepticism. It felt relentless.
And then, of course, the Lewinsky scandal.
Yeah.
This escalated beyond the previous controversies and led to something no president had faced in over a century: impeachment. How did this scandal unfold?
It exploded onto the scene in early 1998. News broke, first online via the Drudge Report, then mainstream media, that President Clinton had engaged in an extended sexual relationship with a young White House intern named Monica Lewinsky starting in 1995 when she was 22.
How'd it come out?
It came out because Lewinsky had confided in a coworker, Linda Tripp, who secretly recorded their conversations. Tripp then took these tapes to Kenneth Starr, the Whitewater Independent Counsel, whose investigation was still ongoing. Starr got permission to expand his inquiry to include this matter.
And the grounds for impeachment weren't the affair itself, right?
Correct. The affair itself wasn't the impeachable offense. The charges centered on Clinton's actions related to the affair. Specifically, perjury, lying under oath, during a deposition he gave in January 1998 for the Paula Jones sexual harassment lawsuit, where he denied having sexual relations with Lewinsky. And obstruction of justice related to his alleged actions to conceal the relationship, like encouraging Lewinsky to file a false affidavit in the Jones case and potentially influencing testimony.
He denied it publicly at first, didn't he?
Seamus. He did. Famously wagging his finger at the camera in January 98, saying, "I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky." He maintained this denial for months until evidence, including a semen-stained blue dress provided by Lewinsky, made his position untenable. In August 1998, he testified before Starr's grand jury via closed-circuit TV and gave a televised address to the nation admitting to an improper physical relationship.
And the impeachment process followed quickly.
Yes. Starr sent his report to Congress in September 98, outlining 11 possible grounds for impeachment. The Republican-controlled House Judiciary Committee approved 4 articles of impeachment. The full House of Representatives then voted on December 19, 1998, approving 2 articles, one for perjury before the grand jury and one for obstruction of justice. This made him only the second U.S. president in history, after Andrew Johnson in 1868, to be impeached by the House.
And what was the outcome of the Senate trial?
The Senate impeachment trial began in January 1999, presided over by Chief Justice William Rehnquist. It lasted about 5 weeks. On February 12, 1999, the Senate voted on the 2 articles. Clinton was acquitted on both charges.
What were the vote counts?
On the perjury charge, the vote was 55 not guilty to 45 guilty. On the obstruction of justice charge, it was an even split, 50 not guilty to 50 guilty. In both cases, these votes fell far short of the 2/3 majority, 67 votes constitutionally required for conviction and removal from office.
Was it strictly along party lines?
Largely, yes. All 45 Democrats voted not guilty on both charges. On perjury, 10 Republicans joined them in voting not guilty. On obstruction, 5 Republicans voted not guilty. It underscored the deep partisan divisions of the time. While acquitted, as a direct consequence of his conduct and testimony in the Jones case, he faced other sanctions. He agreed to a 5-year suspension of his Arkansas law license in 2001, just before leaving office, acknowledging he had given misleading testimony. He also paid a fine and later resigned from the Supreme Court bar entirely. This period represents an unprecedented constitutional crisis in modern times, forcing the nation to grapple with the very definition of high crimes and misdemeanors and the boundaries of presidential conduct, both public and private. The outcome, an acquittal along largely party lines, revealed deeply entrenched partisan divisions within Congress.
But also something about the public.
And, perhaps more significantly, a public that according to polls, disapproved of Clinton's personal behavior, but largely approved of his job performance and did not want him removed from office. This suggested an increasing willingness, or perhaps resignation, among Americans to separate a president's job performance from his personal conduct.
Interesting disconnect.
It raises an important question. What are the long-term implications of a president being impeached but acquitted, especially along partisan lines? Does it weaken the impeachment power? Does it normalize certain kinds of presidential behavior? Does it change how we measure accountability? It truly highlighted a new era of political warfare and shifting public judgment.
His final day in office also brought another wave of controversy surrounding his pardons and commutations. What happened there?
Yes, the last-minute pardons. On January 20th, 2001, literally his last day as president, Clinton issued a flurry of 141 pardons and 36 commutations. This is not unusual for outgoing presidents, but several of his choices were highly controversial.
Who was the most controversial? Mark Rich.
Mark Rich, yes. He was an international commodities trader, a billionaire financier who had fled the U.S. in the 80s to avoid prosecution on massive tax evasion and illegal oil trading charges. He was living as a fugitive in Switzerland. His pardon shocked many, including prosecutors in his own Justice Department.
Why the controversy, besides him being a fugitive?
Allegations quickly surfaced that Rich's ex-wife, Denise Rich, a wealthy socialite and major Democratic Party donor, had lobbied heavily for the pardon and made significant contributions to the Clinton Presidential Library Fund and Hillary Clinton's Senate campaign. It looked like quid pro quo, like access and money bought a pardon.
Was there an investigation?
Yes. A federal investigation, initially led by U.S. Attorney Mary Jo White and later by James Comey, looked into the Rich pardon. They ultimately found no evidence of actual bribery or wrongdoing on President Clinton's part, concluding he acted within his constitutional authority, but the appearance of impropriety lingered and was heavily criticized. There were also allegations that Hillary Clinton's brother, Hugh Rodham, had accepted payments to lobby for pardons for other individuals, which he later returned.
Beyond Mark Rich, were there other notable pardons from that last day?
Yes, Clinton also pardoned several figures connected to past controversies, 4 defendants involved in the Whitewater scandal, including his former business partners, Jim and Susan McDougal, though Jim had already died. Stephen Smith and Robert W. Palmer all received pardons.
Wiping the slate clean on Whitewater.
Seemed like it. Additionally, former HUD Secretary Henry Cisneros, a close Clinton ally who had pleaded guilty years earlier to lying to the FBI about payments to a former mistress, was also among those pardoned. Pardoning his own half-brother Roger Clinton for his past drug conviction also drew some criticism.
And campaign finance issues also plagued his administration right up to the end. One notable controversy involved the alleged practice of offering the Lincoln bedroom for contributors.
That was quite a story, broke around 96-97. Internal White House documents, memos released through investigations, revealed that hundreds of people, perhaps close to 1,000, had stayed overnight at the White House during his first term. And a staggering number of them, over 800, were found to have made significant donations to the Democratic Party or the Clinton campaign.
So access for money.
That was the clear implication. Some of these donors even got the prestigious opportunity to stay in the Lincoln bedroom. High-profile donors like Steven Spielberg, Tom Hanks, Barbra Streisand, Jane Fonda, Judy Collins were among those who got overnight stays. Top donors also allegedly received other perks like invitations to state dinners, golf games, and even morning dogs with the president. It fueled criticism that the White House was being used for fundraising.
Then there was the 1996 United States campaign finance controversy involving foreign money. What were the allegations there?
This was a complex web of allegations surrounding Clinton's 1996 re-election campaign. The core allegation was that individuals connected to the People's Republic of China, including possibly Chinese intelligence agencies, had funneled illegal foreign contributions into the Democratic National Committee, DNC, and potentially the Clinton-Gore campaign itself.
Foreign contributions are illegal, right?
Absolutely illegal under U.S. law. Non-American citizens cannot contribute to federal campaigns. There were figures like John Huang, a former Commerce Department official turned DNC fundraiser, and Charlie Tree, an Arkansas restaurateur who raised millions, much of which was later found to be improperly sourced, possibly from foreign entities.
Was China trying to influence the election?
That was the explosive charge. A Republican-led Senate investigation, chaired by Fred Thompson, concluded that Clinton and the DNC were indeed targeted by a Chinese government plan to influence U.S. policy through campaign contributions. However, Democratic senators on the committee, like Joe Lieberman and John Glenn, disputed this, contending the evidence showed China might have targeted congressional elections, but not necessarily the presidential race directly. The investigations led to some convictions of fundraisers, but no direct link to Clinton knowing the source was illegal. This whole pattern of campaign finance controversies, the Lincoln bedroom stays, the 96 foreign money questions, and the last-minute pardons, though often investigated without charges of direct wrongdoing against Clinton himself, undeniably fed into public perceptions of his Slick Willie image. That nickname seemed to capture a sense that he played fast and loose with the rules, even if he didn't technically break the law.
Blurring ethical lines.
Exactly. It highlights the blurred lines between legitimate fundraising, political access, and potential influence peddling. These are issues that continue to challenge political ethics and public trust across administrations, raising questions about the role of money in politics. It demonstrates how even legally permissible actions, or actions where direct illegality couldn't be proven, can still generate intense ethical and political scrutiny, shaping a leader's enduring legacy.
Beyond domestic policy and personal controversies, Clinton navigated a complex post-Cold War world, making difficult decisions abroad that profoundly shaped U.S. foreign policy. You might recall some of the significant challenges he faced right out of the gate.
He certainly did. The world looked very different after the fall of the Soviet Union. One of the first major crises was in Somalia in 1993. U.S. troops were already there, initially deployed for humanitarian aid during the Bush administration to deal with famine. But under Clinton, the mission shifted.
Mission creep.
Classic mission creep. It shifted towards actively neutralizing Somali warlords, particularly Mohammed Farah Aidid, who were disrupting aid efforts. This led directly to the tragic Battle of Mogadishu in October 1993, later depicted in the book and movie Black Hawk Down.
What happened?
U.S. Army Rangers and Delta Force operators attempted to capture Aidid's top lieutenants. 2 U.S. Black Hawk helicopters were shot down, leading to an intense urban firefight. 18 U.S. soldiers were killed, many more wounded, and the horrifying images of the desecrated corpses of American troops being dragged through the streets were shown on television worldwide.
A disaster.
A public relations and political disaster. It led to a dramatic drop in public support for intervention, not just in Somalia, but more broadly. It resulted in a more cautious approach to using U.S. ground troops in later conflicts, the so-called Somalia syndrome, and ultimately a U.S. withdrawal from Somalia shortly thereafter. It really shaped American thinking about military intervention for years.
And a year later, the Rwandan genocide unfolded. This is often cited as a major regret for his administration, influenced perhaps by Somalia.
Yes, heavily influenced by Somalia. A year later, in Rwanda in April 1994, genocide broke out. Hutu extremists began systematically slaughtering the Tutsi minority and moderate Hutus. Hundreds of thousands were killed in just 100 days, mostly with machetes.
Did the U.S. know what was happening?
Yes. Despite intelligence reports, including the famous facts from UN Commander Romeo Dallaire, clearly indicating a planned final solution to eliminate all Tutsis, the Clinton administration, along with other major powers, actively resisted intervention and even resisted using the word genocide for fear it would legally compel action under the Genocide Convention.
Why the reluctance?
Primarily, the fear of getting bogged down in another complex African conflict with no clear exit strategy, a direct repeat of the Somalia debacle, and the potential political fallout. Clinton later called this failure to act in Rwanda one of his main foreign policy failings, expressing profound regret for not doing more to stop the bloodshed. It remains a stark reminder of the terrible ethical dilemmas faced by leaders and the consequences of inaction.
In Bosnia and Herzegovina, however, during the same period, his administration eventually took a more assertive stance. How did that evolve?
That's right. The Bosnian War had been raging since 1992. From 1993 to 1995, Clinton faced increasing pressure to intervene more forcefully against the Bosnian Serbs who were carrying out ethnic cleansing against Bosnian Muslims, Bosniaks, and Croats. Initially, the U.S. relied on diplomacy and sanctions and limited air patrols.
What changed?
The Srebrenica massacre in July 1995, where Bosnian Serb forces killed over 8,000 Bosniak men and boys, was a major turning point. It galvanized international outrage. Following that, and another Serb attack on Sarajevo, Clinton authorized, and NATO carried out, a sustained bombing campaign against Bosnian Serb targets, Operation Deliberate Force.
And that led to peace.
It did. The bombing, combined with Croatian and Bosniak ground offensives, forced the Serbs to the negotiating table. This led to the Dayton Agreement, brokered by U.S. diplomat Richard Holbrooke in Dayton, Ohio in November 1995, which formally ended the war. Clinton then deployed U.S. peacekeepers as part of a NATO force, IFOR, to uphold this accord. It showed a willingness to use decisive military force when diplomacy failed and vital interests or humanitarian concerns were deemed sufficient.
He also played a crucial role in the Irish peace talks around that time.
Yes, a very different kind of intervention. He invested significant personal effort in the Northern Ireland peace process. He appointed former Senator George Mitchell as his special envoy. Clinton became the first sitting U.S. president to visit Northern Ireland in November 1995, during a fragile ceasefire in the Troubles. His engagement, including granting a controversial visa to Sinn Féin leader Gerry Adams, is credited with helping build trust and momentum for the peace talks that ultimately produced the historic Good Friday Agreement in April 1998.
Moving to the Middle East, how did his administration handle Iran and Iraq, the so-called rogue states?
Regarding Iran, he largely continued the Bush administration's policy of dual containment, aiming to isolate both Iran and Iraq. His administration declared Iran a state sponsor of terrorism and a rogue state, imposing heavy economic sanctions, particularly on its oil industry, and banning most U.S.-Iranian trade. The goal was to pressure the regime over its nuclear program, support for terrorism, and opposition to the Middle East peace process.
Any diplomatic moves towards Iran?
Not significantly on the major issues, though his administration did agree in 1996 to pay Iran $131.8 million in settlement for the tragic 1988 shooting down of Iran Air Flight 655 by a U.S. Navy-guided missile cruiser over the Persian Gulf. A gesture to resolve a past tragedy, perhaps?
And Iraq. Saddam Hussein remained in power after the first Gulf War.
Right. Containment was the policy towards Iraq, too, through sanctions and UN weapons inspections. But tensions remained high. In his 1998 State of the Union address, Clinton warned Congress that Saddam Hussein was building an arsenal of chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons. It's important to note, as history showed later, there wasn't strong evidence for an active nuclear weapons program at that time, though concerns about chemical and biological capabilities persisted.
Did this lead to action?
Yes. After Saddam blocked UN weapons inspectors, Clinton signed the Iraq Liberation Act of 1998 in October. This bipartisan legislation formally made regime change in Iraq official U.S. policy, though it didn't authorize direct military intervention to achieve it, focusing instead on supporting Iraqi opposition groups. This was followed in December 1998 by Operation Desert Fox, a 4-day bombing campaign by U.S. and British forces against Iraqi military targets, launched just as the House was debating his impeachment. Airstrikes in the no-fly zones continued periodically after that.
And the growing threat of Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda was also a major concern for his administration, even before 9/11.
Absolutely. Capturing or killing Osama bin Laden became a key U.S. objective during his second term, especially after al-Qaeda declared war on the U.S. Clinton denied claims, made later by figures like Mansour Hafez and some Sudanese officials, that Sudan had offered to arrest and extradite bin Laden to the U.S. in 1996, and that his administration refused. The 9/11 Commission report later investigated these claims and found no reliable evidence to support the Sudanese offer being credible or actionable.
What actions were taken against bin Laden?
After the devastating 1998 U.S. embassy bombings in Kenya and Tanzania carried out by al-Qaeda, Clinton ordered cruise missile strikes against targets in Afghanistan, where bin Laden was based, and against the Al-Shifa pharmaceutical factory in Khartoum, Sudan.
The Sudan strike was controversial, wasn't it?
Very controversial. The administration claimed the Al-Shifa plant was involved in producing chemical weapons precursors for al-Qaeda. However, the plant was destroyed, causing severe medicine shortages in Sudan. Later investigations, including by U.S. officials, found little or no evidence that the plant was actually involved in chemical weapons production. It highlighted the challenges and potential costs of acting on imperfect intelligence in the fight against terrorism. The strikes in Afghanistan failed to kill bin Laden.
Then in 1999, the conflict in Kosovo became a defining moment for his foreign policy, another intervention.
Yes, the Kosovo War. In 1999, Clinton authorized U.S. participation in a 78-day NATO bombing campaign against Yugoslavia, specifically Serbia and Montenegro, under President Slobodan Milosevic. The stated goal was to stop a campaign of ethnic cleansing, which his administration labeled genocide by Serb forces against the ethnic Albanian majority population in the province of Kosovo who were seeking independence.
Was it a UN-backed operation?
No, significantly. It was not explicitly authorized by the UN Security Council due to likely vetoes from Russia and China. NATO acted unilaterally, citing a humanitarian emergency. General Wesley Clark, the NATO Supreme Allied Commander, oversaw Operation Allied Force. The bombing targeted Serbian military forces, but also infrastructure in Serbia itself.
How did it end?
The bombing campaign ended after 78 days when Milosevic agreed to withdraw his forces from Kosovo. UN Security Council Resolution 1244 was then passed, placing Kosovo under UN administration and authorizing a NATO-led peacekeeping force, KFOR.
Was it universally seen as a success?
It remains debated. Supporters hailed it as a successful humanitarian intervention that stopped ethnic cleansing and paved the way for Kosovo's eventual independence. Critics, however, questioned the legality of acting without UN approval, pointed to civilian casualties from the bombing, and noted that the ethnic cleansing actually intensified after the bombing began, possibly as retaliation. Some also questioned the genocide claims. A post-war UN inquiry noted a vast increase in lootings, killings, rape, kidnappings, and pillage once the NATO air war began. The UN-supervised Supreme Court of Kosovo later ruled that genocide did not take place, but recognized a systematic campaign of terror intended to force the departure of the Albanian population. It's a complex legacy with differing interpretations.
And what was his approach to China during this period? Engagement or containment?
Primarily engagement, especially on the economic front. Clinton aimed to increase trade with China, arguing that economic integration would ultimately lead to political liberalization and improved human rights. He consistently pushed for minimizing tariffs and granting China most favored nation trade status, later renamed Permanent Normal Trade Relations, or PNTR, despite ongoing concerns about China's human rights record, particularly after the Tiananmen Square massacre in 1989.
Were there bumps in the relationship?
Oh, yes. Relations were briefly but severely damaged by the accidental U.S. bombing of the Chinese embassy in Belgrade during the Kosovo campaign in May 1999, which killed 3 Chinese journalists. The U.S. claimed it was based on faulty CIA targeting maps. China suspected it was deliberate. Clinton formally apologized. Despite this, he signed the U.S.-China Relations Act of 2000, granting China PNTR and paving the way for China's accession to the World Trade Organization, WTO, in 2001, just after he left office. He asserted that free trade and WTO membership would advance democratic reform in China, a viewpoint that remains highly debated today.
Finally, in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, he invested heavily in peace efforts, particularly in his second term.
Indeed, this was a major focus for him. Early in his first term, his administration helped facilitate the secret negotiations between Israel and the PLO that led to the historic Oslo Accords, signed on the White House lawn in September 1993.
The famous handshake between Rabin and Arafat.
Exactly, with Clinton presiding. He also helped broker the Israel-Jordan peace treaty in 1994. In his second term, he made a concerted push for a final status agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. He brought Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak and PLO Chairman Yasser Arafat together for intensive negotiations at the Camp David summit in July 2000.
But that summit failed.
It failed to reach a final agreement, despite intense pressure from Clinton. He later offered his own bridging proposals, the Clinton Parameters, in late 2000, trying to outline a compromise on core issues like borders, Jerusalem, refugees, and security. Further talks at Taba, Egypt in early 2001 also failed to close the gaps. Unfortunately, the situation dramatically deteriorated with the start of the Second Intifada, Palestine uprising, in September 2000, effectively ending the Oslo peace process and highlighting the enduring difficulty of resolving that conflict. This global overview truly highlights a presidency that grappled with the tumultuous realities of a post-Cold War world. You had humanitarian crises in Somalia, Rwanda, Bosnia, Kosovo. You had the challenge of rogue states like Iran and Iraq. You had the complex relationship with rising powers like China and the emergence of non-state actors like Al-Qaeda demanding a new kind of response.
A lot on his plate.
A huge amount. The varying approaches, from the cautious withdrawal in Somalia after the Black Hawk Down incident, to the more assertive military interventions in Bosnia and Kosovo, to the persistent diplomatic engagement in the Middle East and Northern Ireland, really define a period of strategic reevaluation for American foreign policy. The U.S. was trying to define its role and responsibilities as the sole superpower in a rapidly changing and often unstable world. It shows a presidency marked by adaptability, ambition, but also by the immense pressure and constraints of global events.
His impact extended significantly to the judiciary, appointing influential justices, and public opinion of him remained fascinatingly complex and often contradictory. First, what does his judicial legacy look like, particularly on the Supreme Court?
He had the opportunity to appoint 2 Supreme Court justices during his first term. First was Ruth Bader Ginsburg in 1993, replacing the retiring Byron White. Second was Stephen Breyer in 1994, replacing Harry Blackmun.
2 giants of the court's liberal wing.
Absolutely. Both Justice Ginsburg and Justice Breyer served for decades, well into the 2020s, leaving a very lasting liberal judicial legacy long after his presidency ended. Their appointments were seen as relatively non-controversial at the time, confirmed with broad bipartisan support.
And beyond the Supreme Court, his appointments to lower federal courts.
That's where he made a significant mark on diversity. Clinton was the first president in history to appoint more women and minority judges than white male judges to the federal courts overall. During his 8 years in office, looking at the numbers, about 11.6% of his Court of Appeals nominees and 17.4% of his district court nominees were Black. Hispanic representation was also increased, and women made up a significant share. 32.8% of his Court of Appeals nominees and 28.5% of his district court nominees were women. This marked a real, tangible shift in the demographic makeup of the federal judiciary.
Public opinion of Clinton was consistently remarkable, particularly in its resilience during scandal. What were the trends in his approval ratings?
It's really fascinating. Throughout his first term, his job approval rating fluctuated quite a bit, generally staying in the 40s and 50s, which is fairly typical. However, in his second term, something unusual happened. His rating consistently ranged from the high 50s to the high 60s, even during the Lewinsky scandal and impeachment proceedings.
His approval went up during impeachment.
Yes. Perhaps most strikingly, he reached his highest approval ratings after the impeachment proceedings began in late 1998 and early 1999. His approval hit peaks around 70% in some polls during that period, a phenomenon that truly perplexed many political observers and infuriated his opponents.
How did he leave office?
He ultimately left office in January 2001 with an impressive 68% approval rating in the final Gallup poll. That matched the departing approval ratings of Ronald Reagan and Franklin D. Roosevelt, among the highest for departing presidents in the modern era. Quite a turnaround from the lows of 94-95.
That's a truly unique phenomenon, high approval after impeachment. But I understand retrospective polling revealed a fascinating disconnect between his job approval and public perception of his personal character.
You're right, it's a real paradox. Despite these high job approval numbers, polling conducted around the time he left office and later revealed this fascinating disconnect. For instance, a poll found 68% of respondents believed he would be remembered more for his personal scandal than for his accomplishments.
Wow. More for scandal.
And another poll found 58% found him not honest and trustworthy. Yet that same poll found 58% rated him outstanding or above average as a president overall.
So people basically separated the two.
It seems so. ABC News famously summarized the public consensus at the time by saying something like, "You can't trust him, he's got weak morals and ethics, and he's done a heck of a good job." That really captured the contradiction. Later retrospective polls continue to show relatively high approval for his presidency itself, with Gallup polls in 2007 and 2011 ranking him as one of the greatest presidents for about 13% of Americans. And a 2015 poll of presidential scholars ranked him 8th overall among U.S. presidents. It's truly a complex and contradictory picture of public perception. What's truly fascinating here is precisely that stark disconnect between public perception of his personal character and his job performance, particularly that approval surge he experienced post-impeachment. It just baffled so many people.
Why do you think that happened?
Several theories. Maybe people rallied around him against what they saw as a partisan attack by Republicans. Maybe they credited him with the strong economy and were willing to overlook personal failings. Maybe the public was simply becoming more cynical or compartmentalized about politicians' private lives. But it raises an important question about how Americans weigh personal ethics against policy achievements when evaluating leadership, and whether, for many, the job performance ultimately overrides personal failings, especially if they feel the country is doing well.
A unique connection with the public.
It truly showcases his remarkable ability to connect with the public and maintain popular support despite immense personal scrutiny and a constitutional challenge. This speaks to a unique political talent for communication, empathy, real or perceived, and perhaps a public willingness to compartmentalize, at least for him.
His public image certainly evolved significantly over time, marked by several nicknames and a rather controversial label. What were some of these descriptors that tried to capture him?
Well, he was, of course, the first baby boomer president, which in itself marked a generational shift in American leadership, style, and cultural references. Early on, remember him playing the saxophone on the Arsenio Hall show during the '92 campaign?
Yeah, iconic moment.
That earned him the affectionate or sometimes critical nickname the MTV president, signaling a connection to youth culture. On the more negative side, the nickname Slick Willie was first applied to him way back in 1980 by an Arkansas journalist criticizing what he saw as Clinton's opportunistic shift away from more progressive policies after his first-term loss. Unfortunately for Clinton, that nickname stuck throughout his presidency, often used by opponents to imply a lack of sincerity, excessive smoothness, or a tendency to trim his sails politically.
On the other hand, he also had some more endearing nicknames, didn't he?
Yeah.
Capturing a different side.
Absolutely. His folksy manner, his Southern charm, and his Arkansas roots earned him the more endearing nickname Bubba during the 1992 campaign, particularly popular among Southerners and working-class voters he connected with. Later, especially after leaving office, he's frequently been referred to by insiders and the media as the big dog, indicating his continued stature and influence within the Democratic Party.
And explainer-in-chief.
Right. That came later, during his post-presidency, particularly for his prominent role campaigning for Barack Obama in 2012 and his widely praised speech at the Democratic National Convention that year, where he masterfully broke down complex economic issues. He earned the nickname Explainer-in-Chief for that remarkable ability to articulate policy details clearly, concisely, and persuasively.
And perhaps the most controversial descriptor came in 1998, during the impeachment saga. Can you tell us about that in the context of Nobel laureate Toni Morrison's comment?
Indeed. This sparked a lot of debate. In October 1998, the acclaimed novelist and Nobel laureate Toni Morrison wrote an essay in The New Yorker, where she controversially referred to Bill Clinton as our first black president.
Why did she say that? What was her argument?
Morrison wasn't being literal, of course. She cited aspects of his background she felt resonated with certain stereotypes or experiences often associated with Black Americans coming from a single-parent household, born poor, working-class roots, being a saxophone player, his love of McDonald's and junk food from Arkansas. More pointedly, she compared the intense, often sexualized scrutiny and investigation he faced during the impeachment crisis to the kind of stereotyping, persecution, and invasion of privacy that, she argued, Black men and Black people in general often endure in America.
How was that received?
It was highly controversial. Many people, including many African Americans, strongly objected to the comparison. They felt it was unfair and even disparaging both to Clinton and, more importantly, to the actual experiences of the African American community and the significance of electing a truly Black president someday. It sparked considerable debate about race, identity, empathy, and political symbolism. This whole array of nicknames and descriptors, from boy governor to Slick Willie, Bubba, the big dog, explainer-in-chief, and even Morrison's provocative label, really captures the multifaceted and often contradictory nature of his public persona. He was a master communicator who could project different things to different people, appealing to diverse groups.
A political chameleon, some might say.
That speaks to his political genius and charisma, but it also highlights the various criticisms and perceptions he faced throughout his career. Each label, whether affectionate or derogatory, reflects a different facet of how he was understood, or perhaps misunderstood, by the American public, and how deeply personal characteristics, background, and style were intertwined with his political identity and legacy.
We must also address the serious allegations of sexual misconduct and alleged affairs that have been central to discussions about his public image and legacy. It's important to understand the different claims made over the years, separate from the Lewinsky scandal specifically.
We certainly must. These allegations were significant and had major legal and political consequences. The most prominent, which directly led to the impeachment crisis, was the Paula Jones lawsuit. Jones, a former Arkansas state employee, initiated a sexual harassment lawsuit against Clinton in 1994.
What did she claim?
She claimed that in 1991, when Clinton was governor, he had propositioned her and exposed himself to her in a hotel room in Little Rock. Clinton denied the allegations. The case wound its way through the courts. It was initially dismissed in 1998 by a judge who ruled Jones failed to show damages, but that ruling was appealed.
And it gained traction after the Lewinsky affair admission.
Yes, significantly. After Clinton admitted the Lewinsky affair, Jones's case gained new life. Her lawyers released court documents alleging a pattern of sexual harassment by Clinton involving other women. Facing the ongoing appeal and the potential for more damaging testimony, Clinton eventually agreed to an out-of-court settlement in November 1998. Paying Jones $850,000, but without admitting wrongdoing. He stated it was purely to end the lawsuit and move on with his presidency.
But the deposition was key.
Crucially, it was his sworn deposition for this lawsuit in January 1998, where he denied under oath having sexual relations with Monica Lewinsky, that formed the basis of the perjury charge in his impeachment.
And then there were other allegations that came to light around the same time during the Starr investigation.
Yes. In 1998, Kathleen Willey, a former White House volunteer, alleged publicly that Clinton had groped her without consent in a private hallway near the Oval Office back in 1993 when she came to ask for a job.
What became of her claim?
Clinton denied it. Ken Starr's investigation looked into it. Starr's report concluded Willey gave false information to the FBI about the incident and other matters. Adding another layer, Willey's friend, Julie Hyatt Steele, claimed Willey had asked her to lie to corroborate the groping account. Starr prosecuted Steele for making false statements and obstruction of justice, but her trial ended in a mistrial and the charges were dropped. Willey maintained her story.
And the Juanita Broaddrick allegation was even more serious.
Yes, significantly more serious. Also in 1998, Juanita Broaddrick, a nursing home administrator from Arkansas, publicly alleged that Bill Clinton had raped her in her hotel room in Little Rock back in the spring of 1978 when he was Arkansas Attorney General and running for governor.
Had she ever reported before?
This was complex. Broaddrick stated she had confided in friends at the time. Years later, during the Paula Jones lawsuit investigation, she had actually filed a sworn affidavit denying any unwelcome sexual advances from Clinton. She repeated this denial under oath in a deposition. However, in 1999, she gave an interview to NBC's Dateline, retracting her previous denials and stating she had denied it under oath only to avoid the trauma of public testimony. She then recounted her rape allegation in detail. Multiple witnesses later came forward stating that Broaddrick had indeed told them back in 1978 that Clinton had raped her. Clinton, through his lawyers, denied the allegation.
The Lewinsky scandal itself, you mentioned, has undergone significant reevaluation, especially in light of the #MeToo movement more recently. How has that perspective shifted?
It's a profound shift in discourse. While the relationship was often framed in the 90s as a consensual affair between two adults, albeit one with a massive power imbalance, many commentators, feminists, Democratic leaders, and even Lewinsky herself have revisited it in the #MeToo era.
Characterizing it differently now.
Yes. Characterizing it more explicitly as an abuse of power, potentially even harassment, due to that immense power differential between the President of the United States and a 22-year-old intern. The focus has shifted from just consent to the ethics of a person in such a high position engaging in a relationship with a subordinate employee decades younger.
How has Clinton responded to this reevaluation?
When asked directly in a 2018 interview if he felt he owed Lewinsky an apology in light of #MeToo, and if he would have handled things differently, Clinton stated he had apologized publicly before and defended his handling of the investigation, saying he would not have done anything differently regarding fighting the charges. This response drew some criticism.
And did this have political repercussions even years later?
There were reports, for example, in the New York Times during the 2018 congressional elections, alleging that some Democratic candidates were hesitant to campaign with Bill Clinton due to this revised understanding of the Lewinsky scandal and the broader sensitivities heightened by the #MeToo movement. It suggests the issue continued to cast a shadow.
Beyond these specific allegations and the Lewinsky affair, Clinton has also admitted to other extramarital affairs or faced claims.
Yes. As mentioned, he eventually admitted to an encounter with Jennifer Flowers, and obviously admitted the affair with Monica Lewinsky. Additionally, over the years, other women came forward claiming affairs with him, particularly during his time as governor. Actress Elizabeth Grayson, who was also Miss America in 1982, former Miss Arkansas winner Sally Perdue, and Dolly Kyle Browning, a childhood friend, all claimed they had long-term affairs with Clinton. Browning later wrote a book about it and sued Clinton and others, alleging a conspiracy to block her book and defame her, but her lawsuit was ultimately dismissed. These claims and admitted affairs paint a complex picture of his personal life, which became inextricably linked with his public career and the intense scrutiny that defined it. This whole area of his legacy, the allegations and the affairs, really highlights a profound and ongoing shift in public discourse around issues of consent, power dynamics in relationships, and accountability for public figures, especially powerful men. The reevaluation of the Lewinsky relationship through the lens of #MeToo is a prime example.
History being reinterpreted.
Exactly. It forces us to consider how historical events are reinterpreted through contemporary ethical frameworks and what that means for how we evaluate leadership from the past. It particularly challenges us to critically re-examine narratives around power imbalances and consent, and consider what standards of conduct the public demands from its leaders today versus perhaps what was tolerated or overlooked in the past.
After leaving the White House in 2001, Clinton didn't just fade away. He remained incredibly active on the global stage, reinventing himself as a humanitarian and elder statesman. What does his post-presidency look like in terms of his global work?
He really threw himself into global work, establishing the William J. Clinton Foundation almost immediately, and he certainly wasn't shy about offering commentary on current events from his successor, George W. Bush. For instance, back in 2002, he publicly warned that preemptive military action against Iraq would likely have unwelcome consequences. He later claimed to have opposed the Iraq War from the start, though the exact timing and nature of his opposition is sometimes disputed.
Still engaged in policy debates.
Very much so. In 2005, he criticized the Bush administration's handling of climate change policy and emissions control at a UN climate change conference in Montreal. His humanitarian work really took off after the devastating 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. UN Secretary General Kofi Annan appointed Clinton as his special envoy to head the international relief and reconstruction effort.
And he famously teamed up with George H.W. Bush.
Yes, a remarkable partnership between former rivals. He joined with former President George H.W. Bush to establish the Bush-Clinton Tsunami Fund in early 2005 to raise money for victims. They made joint appearances and traveled to affected areas together. They reprised this partnership later that same year after Hurricane Katrina devastated the Gulf Coast, forming the Bush-Clinton-Katrina Fund. It showcased a truly bipartisan spirit in times of national and international crisis.
A major part of his post-presidency has been the Clinton Foundation and its initiatives.
Right.
What has that focused on?
It's been a massive, multifaceted undertaking. He founded the William J. Clinton Foundation, now often just called the Clinton Foundation, to address a range of global issues. Major focuses have included combating HIV/AIDS, particularly in developing countries, through the Clinton Foundation HIV and AIDS Initiative, or CHI. CHI worked to negotiate lower prices for life-saving antiretroviral drugs.
And climate change.
Climate change has been another focus, along with economic development and health initiatives globally. He launched the Clinton Global Initiative, or CGI, in 2005. This brought together world leaders, CEOs, philanthropists, and celebrities annually to make specific commitments to address global challenges. CGI claimed credit for things like helping reduce anti-malaria drug prices by 30% in developing nations.
He's also got involved in Haiti.
Yes, significantly. He was named UN Special Envoy to Haiti in 2009 after a series of devastating hurricanes hit the country. Then, after the catastrophic 2010 earthquake, he co-chaired the Interim Haiti Recovery Commission with the Haitian Prime Minister, coordinating international relief and reconstruction efforts. This included establishing the Clinton-Bush Haiti Fund with George W. Bush again, and supporting projects like the development of the Caracol Industrial Park in northern Haiti, aimed at creating jobs. It's an impressive record of global philanthropy and engagement, though the foundation's fundraising and activities also attracted scrutiny, particularly during Hillary Clinton's political campaigns.
His political engagement also remained vigorous, even after the presidency. He didn't exactly retire from politics. How involved has he been in campaigns?
Oh, incredibly involved. He campaigned tirelessly, energetically for Hillary in both her 2008 and 2016 presidential campaigns. He was a major fundraiser for her and acted as a powerful surrogate on the campaign trail, drawing huge crowds.
Even after her tough primary loss in 2008?
Yes. After that bruising 2008 primary battle against Barack Obama, there were initial concerns about party division and whether Clinton would fully support Obama. But he delivered an enthusiastic endorsement speech for Obama at the 2008 Democratic National Convention.
And the 2012 speech.
That was perhaps his most famous post-presidency political moment. He gave a widely praised, lengthy speech formally nominating Barack Obama for re-election at the 2012 DNC. His detailed, folksy defense of Obama's record and critique of the Republican platform solidified his explainer-in-chief nickname for his unique ability to break down complex issues.
He's still involved in the electoral process, Jim.
Directly involved. He continued his role in the Electoral College process, voting for Hillary Clinton and Tim Kaine as an elector for New York in 2016, and for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as an elector again in 2020.
Most recently, he weighed in on the 2024 election, and I understand that also generated some controversy, keeping with the pattern.
It did. He endorsed Joe Biden's re-election bid early in 2024. After Biden withdrew from the race in the summer, Clinton quickly endorsed Kamala Harris. He then gave another critically acclaimed speech at the 2024 DNC in Chicago, emphasizing Democratic job creation under Biden-Harris and praising Harris's achievements and qualifications.
But there was controversy.
Yes. His continued political engagement also brought fresh controversy just weeks before the election. At a campaign stop for Harris in Michigan, a key swing state with a large Arab-American population, he caused significant backlash. While criticizing Arab and Muslim Americans who were hesitant to support Harris due to the administration's policy on the Israel-Gaza war, he stated that Israel had been forced by Hamas's October 7th attack to kill civilians in Gaza while trying to root out Hamas.
That sounds inflammatory.
It drew sharp condemnation from Arab American groups and others who saw it as justifying civilian deaths. His comments were later cited by some critics as a contributing factor to Harris's weaker-than-expected showing among Arab American voters in Michigan, which she narrowly lost. It highlighted the ongoing scrutiny that follows him and the potential risks of his interventions, even decades after leaving office. What's truly fascinating here is this duality of his post-presidency. On one hand, his reinvention as a respected global philanthropist and elder statesman, demonstrating an immense capacity for continued public service and a desire to leverage his influence for global good. The foundation's work, the disaster relief partnerships, that's a significant legacy.
But on the other hand,
his continued deep engagement in active partisan politics, particularly in the contentious 2024 election cycle, highlights the ongoing scrutiny and controversy that seems to follow him, regardless of his role. This raises questions about his evolving relevance to a changing Democratic Party, one perhaps less comfortable with his third-way centrism, and how a legacy defined by navigating the politics of the 90s fits into a more ideologically polarized 21st century landscape.
his personal life, health, and finances have also garnered considerable attention throughout his post-presidency. Let's talk about his wealth. They left the White House in debt, right?
That's what they've said. The Clintons famously incurred millions of dollars in legal bills during his presidency due to the various investigations and the Paula Jones lawsuit. Hillary Clinton stated in an interview years later that they were dead broke and in debt when they left the White House in 2001.
But they recovered financially.
Oh, spectacularly. They successfully paid off those debts within about 4 years. They then earned substantial income, millions upon millions, primarily from lucrative book deals, Bill's autobiography. My Life was a huge bestseller and, perhaps most significantly, from paid speeches around the world.
How much did they make from speeches?
Reports compiled from disclosure forms show that between 2001 and 2015, when Hillary launched her second presidential bid, Bill and Hillary Clinton together earned over $153 million just from giving paid speeches. Bill often commanded fees ranging from $100,000 to over $300,000 per speech, sometimes much more for international appearances. This post-presidency financial success became its own comeback story, though the sources of the income, particularly speeches to corporations and foreign entities, also attracted scrutiny during Hillary's campaigns.
In his personal life, he's a grandfather now, isn't he?
Yes. In his personal life, he married Hillary Rodham back in 1975. They had their only child, Chelsea, in 1980. Chelsea is now married with 3 children, making Bill Clinton a grandfather several times over, a role he seems to embrace fully in public appearances.
His health has also been a public concern over the years, with several serious scares.
It has. In September 2004, just a few years after leaving office, he underwent emergency quadruple bypass surgery after experiencing chest pains and shortness of breath. Then, in March 2005, he had a follow-up surgery for a partially collapsed lung, a complication from the bypass. And in February 2010, he was hospitalized again in New York for chest pains and had 2 coronary artery stents implanted to open a blocked artery.
That led to a change in diet, didn't it?
Yes, a significant one. Following these heart procedures, Clinton became a prominent advocate for a healthier lifestyle. He lost considerable weight and adopted a largely plant-based vegan diet for several years, though he has since reportedly reincorporated some fish and lean protein at the suggestion of doctors.
More recent health issues.
More recently, he was hospitalized in California in October 2021 and treated for a non-COVID-related sepsis infection. In November 2022, he announced he had tested positive for COVID-19 with mild symptoms. He was briefly hospitalized again in February 2024 for a fever related to a urinary tract infection. And in early 2025, he was seen in public wearing a portable defibrillator vest, underscoring ongoing heart health monitoring and challenges.
Finally, let's touch on the many accolades he has received, which speak to the significant impact and enduring respect he commands in many quarters, despite the controversies. It's quite a long list.
It really is quite extensive. He has, of course, been awarded numerous honorary degrees from colleges and universities around the world. He's also an honorary fellow of University College, Oxford, where he once studied as a Rhodes Scholar.
Recognition from other countries, too.
Yes. His contributions, particularly his intervention in the Balkans and his post-presidency work, have been recognized internationally. As mentioned, schools and even statues have been named for him. In gratitude for his role in ending the Kosovo War, the capital city of Pristina renamed a major street Bill Clinton Boulevard and erected a prominent statue of him. In 2011, Haitian President Michel Martelly awarded him the National Order of Honor and Merit, Haiti's highest honor, for his initiatives and contributions to the country's reconstruction after the 2010 earthquake.
And he's even been named Time Man of the Year multiple times, right?
Twice, yes. Time magazine named him Man of the Year, first in 1992 after his election victory. And then again, quite unusually, he shared the title in 1998 with Kenneth Starr, his impeachment antagonist, symbolizing the defining conflict of that year. He was also included among Gallup's list of the most widely admired people of the 20th century.
Other notable awards.
He's received the NAACP President's Award in 2001 for his record on civil rights. He won the J. William Fulbright Prize for International Understanding, named after his mentor. He received the TED Prize in 2007 for his wish to create a better healthcare system in rural areas. He also received an honorary Gilad Media Award for his pro-LGBT stances later in his career, and particularly for his reversal on the Defense of Marriage Act, DOMA, which he had signed into law but later argued should be overturned.
And Grammys. That's surprising.
Remarkably for a politician, he has won 2 Grammy Awards. In 2003, he won for Best Spoken Word Album for Children for narrating Wolf Tracks and Peter and the Wolf, an album he shared with Mikhail Gorbachev and Sophia Loren. And again, in 2005, he won Best Spoken Word Album for the audiobook recording of his autobiography, My Life.
And the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
Yes, in 2013, he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, America's highest civilian honor, by his successor in the Democratic Party, President Barack Obama. It's an extraordinary list, isn't it? Spanning politics, humanitarian work, even entertainment. These accolades highlight his significant contributions across various fields and the enduring respect he garners in many circles, both domestically and internationally, even amidst the controversies that have defined so much of his public life.
A complex figure.
Incredibly complex. His undeniable ability to connect with people on a personal level, combined with his policy achievements during a time of peace and prosperity, and his extensive post-presidency humanitarian work, truly secures his place as a figure of considerable global influence and historical significance. It's a testament to his multifaceted, often contradictory, but undeniably impactful legacy.
And for those wanting even more insight, you can look forward to his second volume of memoirs, Citizen. My Life After the White House, which is scheduled to be published in November 2024, offering yet another perspective from the man himself on his remarkable journey after leaving office. So we've journeyed through the incredible, often tumultuous life of Bill Clinton. From the boy governor of Arkansas overcoming early setbacks, to a 2-term president navigating economic booms and foreign crises, to a truly global statesman in his post-presidency. It's a life marked by both soaring triumphs and deep, often intensely personal controversies.
Absolutely. He oversaw that period of unprecedented economic expansion in the 90s, presided over complex international interventions from Bosnia to Kosovo, and yet faced a historic impeachment stemming from his personal conduct. His ability to connect with people, that empathy, often called his political genius, was legendary, as was, unfortunately for him, the intense scrutiny that followed him seemingly every step of the way.
Indeed. His story is such a testament to political resilience, maybe an unparalleled capacity for reinvention in modern politics. But it also profoundly reflects the shifting landscape of American politics itself and the evolving public expectations for its leaders over the past few decades.
That's a great point. What stands out to me most about his career is perhaps how he mastered the art of political adaptation, constantly adjusting his message, his policies, sometimes his principles, critics would say, while always managing somehow to remain at the very center of public attention, for better or for worse.
Always in the spotlight.
Always. His presidency, and indeed his entire public life, consistently challenged, maybe even blurred, the boundaries between the personal and the political. It leaves us constantly pondering how much these spheres truly intersect or should intersect in our evaluation of a leader. And how does that balance shift over time across different eras and different public moods?
That's a powerful thought to leave you with, isn't it? What does it truly mean to lead, especially in the modern media age, when your personal conduct and your political achievements are constantly intertwined, scrutinized, and judged, often by very different metrics depending on who you ask? We hope this deep dive has given you a clearer, more nuanced understanding of Bill Clinton's complex, controversial, and undoubtedly enduring legacy.
Hope it provided some food for thought.
Until next time, on the deep dive. Keep digging for those nuggets of knowledge.